Ever feel like you're on like a roller coaster with your emotions? Up 1 minute, down the next. It's exhausting. Well, today we're going to try something different. We're taking a deep dive into a philosophy that offers a different path, a path to inner peace and resilience, no matter what life throws at you. We're talking about Stoicism.
It's amazing how relevant this is.
Yeah.
I mean, this philosophy from ancient Greece, it's still relevant today.
Yeah.
It's like they had a time machine
Yeah.
and they saw all the stress
Yeah.
we'll be facing in the 21st century.
It really is. And to guide us through this deep dive, we've got a great book. It's Donald Robertson's Stoicism and the Art of Happiness. Now, Robertson isn't just some philosophy professor.
No.
He's a cognitive behavioral psychotherapist.
Right.
So he brings this really interesting perspective, like blending this ancient wisdom with modern psychology.
And that's one of the things that makes it so interesting to me. It's you can really see the connections between Stoicism and modern therapy.
Yeah.
Especially CBT, cognitive behavioral therapy.
Yes. It's like the Stoics. We're like early adopters of mindfulness and emotional regulation techniques.
Right. Okay, so let's get to the heart of it. What is Stoicism? I mean, I've heard the name, but to be honest, it's always sounded a bit intimidating, like something only super serious philosophers could understand.
Well, that's a common misconception.
Okay.
Stoicism is actually very practical and down to earth.
Okay.
It started back in Athens around 300 BC with a guy named Zeno of Citium. He started teaching on a stoa, basically like a covered porch, and that's actually where the name Stoicism comes from.
So no togas required.
No togas required.
That's a relief.
Here's another thing that might surprise you. Stoicism, it's not just, a random collection of sayings. It's actually a whole system with 3 interconnected branches: logic, physics, and ethics.
3 branches. Okay, now it's starting to sound a bit more like a philosophy class. Break it down for me. What does each branch focus on? Yeah. Well, you can think of these branches as like different lenses for understanding the world and our place in it. So logic is all about clear thinking, and reasoning. How do we know what we know? Physics in the Stoic sense. This isn't about equations and labs or anything like that.
Right.
It's about understanding the nature of the universe and how everything is interconnected. And then finally, ethics, which is really the heart of Stoicism, how to live a virtuous and fulfilling life.
Virtue. Okay, there's a word you don't hear every day. What did the Stoics mean by that?
Well, the Stoics, virtue was the key to happiness.
Mm-hmm.
And they weren't talking about some vague idea of being good.
Right.
They broke it down into 4 cardinal virtues: wisdom, justice, courage, and temperance.
So being wise, just courageous, and exercising self-control, that's the Stoic recipe for a good life.
It's a great start. But here's where things get really interesting. The Stoics believed that virtue, or excellence of character, was the sole good. Not wealth, not health, not even pleasure. Only virtue truly matters. And everything else falls into a category they called indifference.
Hold on, are you saying that things like wealth or health don't matter at all to Stoics? That seems a bit extreme.
It's not that those things are bad. It's more that they're not inherently good or evil in themselves.
Okay.
What matters is how we use them.
I see.
Do they help us live virtuously, or do they distract us from what truly matters?
So you're saying it's all about perspective, not getting too attached to the ups and downs of life. Because let's be honest, if I lose my health or my job, I think it's going to be pretty hard to just shrug it off and say, oh, well, these are just indifference.
Well, and that's where the real challenge of Stoicism comes in, right?
Right.
It's about recognizing that while we can't always control external events, we can control our reactions to them. And that's really where the path to true happiness lies.
Okay, I'm starting to see how this works, but it also sounds really hard. Like, how do you even train yourself to not freak out when things go wrong?
Well, the Stoics had a whole toolkit of techniques for that. But before we dive into those, let's talk about why they place so much emphasis on controlling our emotions. They call them passions.
I have to admit, that's the part of Stoicism that's always seemed a bit off-putting to me. It's like, shouldn't we embrace our emotions, feel the full spectrum of life?
That's a great question. And it highlights a really common misconception about Stoicism. It's not that they were advocating for a life devoid of emotion. They recognized that we would have natural initial reactions to events. They called these proto-passions.
Okay.
So it's not about denying our feelings, but choosing how we respond to them.
So it's not about denying our feelings, but about choosing how we respond to them.
Exactly. And that's where the Stoic concept of healthy passions comes in.
Okay.
They believe there were appropriate ways to experience emotions like joy, caution, and even love.
Okay, so free from destructive passions, but full of love and joy. That makes a lot more sense. But how do you actually do that? How do you go from knee-jerk emotional reactions to this like calm, reasoned, stoic ideal?
Well, that's where the practical side of Stoicism really shines. They develop 3 disciplines to help us cultivate virtue and manage our emotions: the discipline of desire, the discipline of action, and the discipline of assent.
3 disciplines sounds intriguing. Let's dive into those.
So welcome back to our deep dive into Stoicism. We left off talking about the 3 disciplines: desire, action, and assent. You could think of these as the Stoic toolkit for living a more virtuous and fulfilling life.
Okay, so let's unpack these disciplines one by one. Where do we even begin?
Let's start with the discipline of desire. It's all about accepting what's beyond our control. You know, that feeling when you're stressing about things you literally can't change: traffic jams, the weather, other people's opinions. The discipline of desire is about letting go of that struggle.
That sounds great in theory, but like easier said than done, right? Like if my flight gets delayed, I'm probably still going to feel frustrated.
Oh, of course, it's not about becoming some emotionless robot, right? It's about recognizing that our energy is best spent focusing on what we can control: our thoughts, our judgments, and our actions. And the Stoics have a famous saying for this.
Oh, yeah.
God grant me the serenity to accept the things I can. I cannot change, the courage to change the things I can, and the wisdom to know the difference.
That really puts things in perspective. It's about focusing on what's within our sphere of influence, right?
Exactly. And that brings us to the second discipline, the discipline of action. This is about acting in accordance with virtue, duty, and reason. It's about doing the right thing even when it's hard, but with a crucial caveat: fate permitting.
Fate permitting. What does that mean?
It's the Stoic way of acknowledging that we can't control the outcome of our actions, only our intentions. We can make the most virtuous choices, put in the effort, but we have to accept that the final result isn't always in our hands.
So there's a certain amount of humility in this discipline. We do our best, but we surrender to the fact that we're not in total control of the universe.
Exactly. And that acceptance can be incredibly freeing. It allows us to act with purpose and conviction without getting bogged down by anxieties about the outcome.
Okay, so we've got the discipline of desire, accepting what we can't control, and the discipline of action, doing the right thing. Fate permitting. What about that third one, the discipline of assent?
This one is all about our judgments and beliefs. It's about carefully examining our impressions and making sure they're aligned with reason and reality. It's easy to get caught up in negative thoughts or biased perspectives.
You mean like when I jump to conclusions about a situation before getting all the facts?
Precisely. The discipline of assent is about slowing down our thought process, questioning our assumptions, and making sure our beliefs are grounded in reason and evidence.
So it's like a mental filter, weeding out the irrational thoughts and beliefs that can lead to unnecessary stress and unhappiness.
Exactly. The Stoics believe that our thoughts have a powerful impact on our emotions and actions. By learning to control our thoughts, we can gain mastery over our inner world.
Okay, this is all starting to make sense, but I'm still wondering how we put these disciplines into practice. Do you have any examples of what this looks like in everyday life?
Absolutely.
Sure.
Let's say you're stuck in that traffic jam we talked about earlier. Instead of letting frustration take over, you could practice the discipline of desire by accepting that the traffic is out of your control. Then you could use the discipline of action to make the best of the situation. Listen to a podcast, make a phone call, maybe even practice some mindfulness exercises and the discipline of assent. Well, they can help you challenge the thought that this traffic jam is ruining your entire day.
Oh, I see how shifting your perspective in that moment could make a huge difference. It's not about pretending that everything is fine. It's about